guys, Nikki here again, and I want to talk to you about what makes Young Living different from everybody else in the essential oil industry. I often am asked, isn't Young Living just the same as company XYZ? And my answer is a definite no. There really is no comparison with Young Living. And I say that because while there are many, many companies out there that produce or bottle, at least, essential oils, everything from clothing companies to perfume companies to home fragrance companies, to companies that are exclusively essential oil companies, none of them can even begin to compare to the standards of Young Living. And I say that having done the research. You don't have to take my word for it. You can do this research. I will tell you it's extremely time consuming, but when you really look into the companies, where they get their oils from, and what sort of testing they do for their oils to make sure you're getting a true therapeutic product, you find there's just no comparison. Young Living has a seed to seal guarantee that is hands down the best thing you've ever seen when it comes to essential oils. Now, I'll say every company has a slogan, a logo, a trademarked phrase that they use to say that theirs is the best. And, while I won't say that there aren't companies out there that produce pure essential oils, I will say with all definitive, I have no question, they cannot compare to the potency and quality that Young Living has. And part of that comes down to things like with the seed to seal process. Young Living chooses the seeds that go into creating their oils. Now that, for one, means choosing seeds that are going to produce oils that are consistent and regular, because when you're dealing with nature, you know that consistency is not necessarily something that's just going to happen. And so you want to have seeds that come from true producers of quality oil. Additionally, you want those to be the strains of oil that you want. Many of you, if you've studied, for instance, lavender is a great example, where there are many different strains of lavender. There's only one true strain, the Lavandula angustifolia officinalis. Others tend to be a hybrid or just a variation on the theme. When I want lavender, I want Lavandula angustifolia officinalis. Now, the problem with that comes in that if you're not producing your own lavender and you're buying from a bulk salesperson, you don't necessarily know that that's pure lavender. And the reason I say that is because if you look at France, depending on which studies or numbers you want to see, which years, that sort of thing, regions, you will find that France exports anywhere from 80 to sometimes I've seen as high as 140% more lavender oil than they actually produce. Now, how does that happen? That happens because we either hybridize it by adding in lavandin oil, which is very common, or we synthesize it and create a fragrance that is chemically similar to pure natural lavender, but clearly not the same thing. And those sorts of things happen all the time because in the United States, there's no regulatory definition of essential oil. And that's something that I think we really need to keep in mind. When you're looking at therapeutic grade, pure, 100% essential oils on a label, there can literally be no naturally produced oil in that bottle, and it can still call itself 100% pure therapeutic grade essential oil. And that sounds ridiculous, and it is, but it's the reality of our, regulatory systems in the United States. And so the difference between an $8 bottle of lavender and a $28 bottle of lavender is probably the fact that one contains lavender and the other most likely does not. And so those sorts of things need to be taken into consideration. And so when you're dealing with Young Living, you're dealing with a company that, because the vast majority of their oils actually come from their own farms, we produce them, we distill them, we bottle them, all this kind of fun stuff, we know exactly what's in that bottle. Additionally, with the seed to seal process, you have the seed, then you have the cultivation. Young Living follows well exceeding the U.S. standards for certified for organic farming. We focus more on the international standards because they're just so much higher than the U.S. standards. And so by meeting and exceeding international standards for organic farming, you know that you have pure, untainted essential oils. Additionally, the distillation process, the number of hours and the expense that has gone into trying to find the perfect distillation process for every single oil is insane. Nobody does this. For instance, cypress oil is an easy example. Cypress oil has roughly 208 chemical constituents in it. If you distill it either at too high a temperature or too short or too long a time, you lose the majority of those chemical constituents. The average amount of time that companies across the world distill cypress for is 3.5 hours. That will eliminate up to 18 chemical constituents from that oil. Young Living, after years and years and hours of research, discovered that the perfect amount of time to and the perfect temperature to distill cypress at is 220 degrees Fahrenheit with 0 pressure and 24 hours flat. And then you maintain all of the chemical constituents. Other companies, can't tell you that that's what happens with their distillation because either they purchase the oil from a bulk oil salesman or they use the 3.5 hours, which is the standard for distillation across throughout the world. Those sorts of things allow the chemicals that are in the naturally occurring chemicals that are in Young Living oils to be different from the naturally occurring chemicals that are in other essential oils. Okay. Then you have the bottling that occurs with Young Living, the harvest, the bottling. The plants are only harvested at their peak levels, no matter what time of day, no matter what time of year. They're tested constantly to see when they're at their absolute peak. That's when they are harvested. That's when they are distilled. That's when they are bottled. Young Living making sure that only glass and stainless steel touch the oils. They don't store them in plastic. They don't store them in wood because all of those things are going to alter the chemical constituents in that oil. They are also even careful with the bottles that they use, that they are obviously glass bottles, but that the stoppers that they use in them are not plastic, but instead silicone, so they're not leaching into the oil, which is very different from what you're going to find across the board. Additionally, Young Living tests every single batch of its essential oils with a minimum of 18 just out of this world tests. Now, most companies that have any sort of credibility whatsoever, and again, I'm not going to say there aren't companies out there that don't have credible, decent quality oils out there, and they probably use gas chromatography as well as mass spectrum gas chromatography. Yeah, the big words just don't come out of my mouth some days. They very likely use both of those. Young Living uses 18, including those. Many of the tests, Young Living's the only company that does, and has actually been able to, in some instances, detect when a supplier, Young Living has partnerships in some cases where they can't have a farm, where a supplier has either inadvertently or on purpose added a synthetic to the oil that would not have been detected, and frankly was not detected by others, to have synthetics involved in it. Young Living turned those oils down because they did contain synthetics. We can test for that. There are other companies that simply cannot, and frankly, most other companies simply cannot. Those 18 tests minimum that I mentioned, those occur 3 different times in 2 different Young Living in-house labs, as well as a third-party lab. And that happens because Young Living wants to make sure they are so above the board that, again, there's just nobody that can compete with it. There are companies that will send out some batches for third-party testing here and there, but we're the only ones that consistently send every batch to third-party testing, and that testing actually means something. We have had whole batches destroyed, basically used as fertilizer and as pesticides, because although they probably met, and I can just about guarantee you any other essential oil company would have bottled and sold them. I'm sure they met normal standards. They didn't meet Young Living standards, and they are so stringent that they will literally just utilize those oils as fertilizer and pesticides rather than allowing them to be bottled and sold to Young Living members, because the quality that Young Living requires is just beyond what you see anywhere else, period. All right. So Young Living's seed to seal process is something that really does have the bite to back up the bark. It is a true process of excellence that just isn't found elsewhere. And again, I'm not trying to put down other companies. Many of them, again, can produce decent oils, good oils even. None of them produce the oils that Young Living does, period. All right, so that's one of the things that makes Young Living so different from everybody else. Then you get into the Young Living Foundation and the farms, and I could go on and on. This could be a 40-minute presentation all by itself, but I don't want to do that to you. So I will say you can learn about Young Living Foundation and all of its incredible projects in the 2017 product guide, which will come with your premium starter kit. You can also learn about it. You can learn about the Young Living farms, and you can visit the Young Living farms. Ask any other essential oil company if you can come visit their farms, their distillation centers. Young Living's very transparent. You absolutely can. You can plant lavender. Been there, done that. It's really pretty cool. You can read about all of that in the 2017 product guide, which will come with your premium starter kit. If you have any questions about the seed to seal process, about anything else involving what makes Young Living so different from everybody else, feel free to put them down in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you again in post number 3. Thanks. Bye-bye.